Have you ever discovered that the people you love most in this world see you as nothing more than a burden? That everything you've sacrificed, every dollar you've spent, every sleepless night you've worked has been reduced to a simple calculation in their minds? Well, that's exactly what happened to me, and what I did about it will shock you to your core. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for every single detail of what happens next, because this story has more twists than a Hollywood thriller. My name is Roy, and I'm 73 years old. For the past 2 years, I've been living alone in the house my late wife Ellen and I built together over 25 years ago. Every brick, every board, every custom detail was installed with our own hands and paid for with our own sweat. Ellen passed away from cancer, and since then, I've been trying my best to maintain the life we created together while dealing with the crushing loneliness that comes with losing your soulmate. My daughter Caitlin has always been the light of my life. From the moment she took her first steps in our kitchen to watching her graduate college with honors, I've done everything in my power to give her the best life possible. I worked double shifts for years to pay for her education, spent my weekends building her a custom dollhouse that was an exact replica of our home, and even took out a second mortgage to help fund her dream wedding when she married Jeremy 5 years ago. Jeremy seemed like a good man at first. He had this way of making Caitlin laugh that reminded me of how Ellen used to light up when I told her jokes. He worked as a financial advisor, spoke confidently about investments and market trends, and always called me the most generous father-in-law in Colorado. I was proud to have him as part of our family, proud that my daughter had found someone who appreciated what we'd built together. But something started changing after Ellen died. The phone calls became less frequent. The visits felt more obligatory than genuine. When Caitlin and Jeremy did come over, I noticed how their eyes would wander around the house, taking inventory of things in a way that made my stomach uneasy. Still, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Grief does strange things to your mind, and I figured I was just reading too much into innocent glances. The evening that changed everything started like any other. I was sitting in Ellen's old recliner, scraping the last bits of meatloaf from my plate. It was her recipe, though mine never quite tasted right without her magical touch. The house felt enormous around me, filled with 25 years of memories, but empty of the laughter that once made it feel alive. When the phone rang and I saw Caitlin's name on the caller ID, my heart did that little skip it always did when my daughter called. Her voice carried that familiar warmth that made me forget, for just a moment, how alone I'd become. "Dad, how are you holding up?" she asked, and I could picture her settling into her own evening routine, probably curled up on the couch Jeremy and I had picked out together last year. We talked about the usual things: her business trip to Phoenix, some conference about digital marketing trends that she found incredibly boring. Jeremy was handling client meetings, while she sat through presentations that made her want to fall asleep. Normal daughter-to-father conversation that filled my heart with that bittersweet mixture of love and longing. I mentioned a small incident from the day before, how I'd forgotten to turn off the burner under my coffee pot and only noticed when I smelled something burning. It was the kind of minor mistake that happens to everyone, but I could hear something shift in Caitlin's voice when I told her about it. "Dad, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more regularly," she said, and there was a pause that felt heavy with unspoken concerns. We wrapped up the call with the usual expressions of love. She told me to take care of myself, I told her I loved her, and everything seemed perfectly normal when I heard that familiar click indicating she'd hung up. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Instead of the dial tone I expected, I heard rustling sounds, muffled voices. Caitlin hadn't actually hung up the phone properly. It had fallen into her purse or been set down without disconnecting, and suddenly I was listening to a conversation I was never meant to hear. "Jeremy, you see how he's deteriorating?" That was Caitlin's voice, but it was completely different from the warm, caring tone she'd used with me just moments before. This voice was cold, calculating, discussing me like I was a problem that needed solving. "He forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if he burns the house down?" she continued, and I could hear Jeremy responding in the background. My hand froze on the receiver. Ice spread through my chest as I realized they were talking about me like I wasn't a person, but rather an inconvenience they needed to manage. "It's time for a nursing home, Caitlin." Jeremy's voice came through clearly now. "He's becoming a burden, and you know it. Your dad's a good man, but he can't live alone anymore." A burden. The word hit me like a physical blow. This was my daughter, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep through countless nights, calling me a burden. But what came next was even worse. The house is worth almost $1 million now, Caitlin said, and her tone had shifted to pure calculation. With Denver's market, we could probably get 900,000, maybe more. Exactly, Jeremy replied, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. We could sell it, put him somewhere decent but not too expensive, and finally buy that house in Boulder we've been looking at. The one with the mountain view. Then my daughter laughed. She actually laughed while discussing my future like I was a piece of property to be liquidated. God, Jeremy, you should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea we're planning this. The longer we wait, the more confused he'll get. We should strike while he still trusts us completely. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor that Ellen and I had installed together 23 years ago. Every board had been laid by my own hands, every nail driven with thoughts of our family's future. Now my daughter was planning to sell it all and warehouse me in some facility while they lived in luxury with the proceeds. I sat in the sudden silence of my empty house, staring at Ellen's photograph on the end table. Her eyes seemed to bore into mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it disappointment? Warning? Or maybe just the terrible knowledge that comes to those who've already left this world and can see things more clearly than the living. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily in the growing darkness. It had been Ellen's anniversary gift to me 15 years ago, and its familiar rhythm had always been comforting. Tonight, each tick felt like a countdown to my doom. Outside, I could hear the first spring crickets beginning their evening song in the garden Ellen had planted, and I still tended. Normal sounds of a normal evening, but nothing felt normal anymore. Something cold and hard was settling in my chest, replacing the warmth I'd felt just moments before when I'd heard my daughter's voice. They thought I was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and discarded like an old piece of furniture. They were already spending my money in their minds, already planning their new life built on my grave. But there was one crucial thing they'd failed to consider. I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I don't know how long I sat there in that leather recliner, Ellen's face watching me from the silver frame on the end table. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had heard my daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath. My legs felt unsteady when I finally stood to turn on the lamp, but my mind was crystal clear for the first time in months. The warm light fell across our living room, illuminating every piece of furniture we'd chosen together, every memory we'd created in this space. The burgundy sofa where Caitlin used to curl up doing homework, while Ellen helped her with math problems. The coffee table I'd built in the garage during one of those bitter Colorado winters, sanding it smooth while 3-year-old Caitlin played with wooden blocks at my feet. But now I was seeing it all through different eyes, not as a home filled with love and memories, but as dollar signs, square footage, market value, liquid assets waiting to be converted into someone else's dream house with a mountain view. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept important papers. My fingers found the folder I was looking for without conscious thought, that manila envelope I'd been meaning to organize for years. Ellen always said, "You never know when you might need these old records, Roy. Don't throw them away." God, I should have listened to her about so many things. Inside that folder was the financial story of my devotion to Caitlin. University of Colorado tuition receipts totaling $48,000, over 4 years. I remembered those double shifts like they were yesterday, coming home with concrete dust caked in my hair and plaster embedded under my fingernails. Ellen would have coffee waiting and would massage my shoulders, while I sat at this very kitchen table, calculating how to afford Caitlin's spring semester. "Roy, you're working yourself to death," Ellen had said one particularly rough night, watching me shuffle through bills and payment schedules. "She deserves better than we had, Ellen," I'd replied. "She's smart enough for anything." Ellen had kissed the top of my head, her lips soft against my thinning hair. "Just don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." Those words echoed in my mind now like a prophecy I'd been too blind to heed. The wedding receipts were there too, $32,000 for one perfect day. I told Caitlin we could afford 5,000, maybe 8 if we really stretched our budget, but she'd cried real tears about wanting her dream wedding, about not wanting to start her marriage feeling like she'd settled for less than she deserved. So I worked weekends for 6 months, installing hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid me under the table. My back ached for weeks after each job, but seeing Caitlin's face light up when she talked about her wedding dress made every moment of pain worthwhile. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world," she'd whispered during our father-daughter dance, her head resting on my shoulder, while her wedding dress rustled against my rented tuxedo. I'll never forget this. But she had forgotten, just like she'd forgotten who co-signed her first car loan when her credit wasn't established. Just like she'd forgotten who made phone calls to his business contacts to help her land that marketing job after 8 months of unemployment following graduation. I found bank statements from 2 years ago, right after Jeremy lost his financial advisor position for reasons they never fully explained to me. They'd moved in temporarily, just until Jeremy found something new, they said. I'd never charged them rent, never asked them to contribute to utilities or groceries. Instead, I'd quietly absorbed the costs of feeding 3 adults instead of one lonely widower. Jeremy would pat my shoulder during those months and call me the most generous father-in-law in Colorado. Caitlin would hug me tight and promise they'd pay me back once they got on their feet. But they'd been on their feet for over a year now, both working good jobs, both earning more money than I'd ever made in my best years. Yet they'd never mentioned moving out, never brought up repaying what they owed. There was the anniversary dinner receipt from last month, $200 at that fancy steakhouse downtown, because Jeremy said they deserved to celebrate their milestone. The car repair bill I'd covered when Jeremy's BMW needed a new transmission, $3,000 that completely wiped out my emergency fund. Roy's like a father to me, Jeremy had told his friends at their last barbecue, his arm draped around my shoulders like we were the closest family in the world. I'm so lucky to have married into this family. I'd been proud in that moment, actually proud to be seen as the generous father-in-law, the man who took care of his family no matter what it cost him personally. Now I realized that pride had been built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. Walking upstairs felt like climbing a mountain. Each step carried the weight of 25 years of memories, but also the crushing realization that those memories meant nothing to the people I'd created them for. Ellen's in my bedroom remained exactly as it had been the day she died. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, her reading glasses folded beside the lamp she'd used for her evening novels. I opened the bottom drawer of our dresser and pulled out the original house deed. Roy and Ellen Hayes, purchased 1999. No liens, no cosigners, no complications. Just 2 names that had become one after Ellen's passing, leaving everything in my sole ownership. Standing there in the bedroom where Ellen had spent her final days, surrounded by everything we'd built together, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp as broken glass cutting through my chest. But underneath that pain, something harder was forming, something that felt suspiciously like resolve. They wanted to put me away and sell my life's work like it was nothing more than a real estate transaction. They thought I was too old, too confused, too grateful for scraps of their attention to fight back against their betrayal. I looked at Ellen's photo on the nightstand, remembering her voice from all those years ago. Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. Well, Ellen, I whispered to her image, our daughter has definitely forgotten, but she's about to remember that her old man isn't as helpless as she thinks. I walked to my home office and pulled out a business card I'd kept in my desk drawer for 3 years. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. Ellen had insisted we meet with him after her cancer diagnosis, just to make sure our affairs were properly organized for whatever came next. It was time for another consultation. The next morning arrived with unusual clarity. I woke up feeling more focused than I had in months, as if overhearing that conversation had burned away the fog of grief and loneliness that had been clouding my judgment. I walked through my house like I was seeing it for the first time, but instead of seeing home, I was seeing what Caitlin and Jeremy saw when they looked around. Square footage, market value, liquid assets. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the granite countertop I'd installed myself, working by lamplight after my regular construction job because we couldn't afford to hire professionals. Ellen had picked out the pattern, a speckled gray with veins of gold that caught the morning light beautifully. She'd made coffee on this counter every morning for 16 years until cancer stole her strength. I remembered the Christmas morning when 3-year-old Caitlin had taken her first wobbly steps right here, from the refrigerator to Ellen's outstretched arms. We'd both cried with joy as Ellen scooped our daughter up and spun her around while I scrambled for the camera. Our baby's walking in our house, Ellen had whispered through her tears, in the house we built for her. Now that same daughter wanted to sell our house and use the money to buy herself a mountain view. The living room held decades of Christmas mornings. I could still picture 7-year-old Caitlin's face lighting up when she saw the dollhouse I'd spent 3 months building in secret. Working in the garage after she'd gone to bed, creating a perfect replica of our home, complete with tiny furniture Ellen had crafted from cardboard and fabric scraps. "Daddy, it's just like our house," Caitlin had squealed. And it was. I'd made sure every detail was perfect, right down to the little bay window that represented her bedroom. That bay window had cost me 6 months of overtime pay. Ellen had seen it in a magazine and fallen in love with the idea of having a reading nook where she could spend quiet afternoons with her mystery novels. I taught myself to cut angles I'd never attempted before, measuring and remeasuring until my back ached from crawling around the window frame. "Roy, we can't afford this," Ellen had worried when she saw me marking measurements on the wall. "You want it, you'll have it," I told her with the confidence of a man who believed love could overcome any obstacle. "I'll make it work." And I had made it work, through sheer determination and countless hours of overtime labor. Now my daughter was planning to sell that window, that room, that entire house built with love, so she could upgrade her own lifestyle. I climbed the stairs to Caitlin's old bedroom, still painted the soft yellow she'd chosen for her 16th birthday. The walls were still decorated with photos of high school friends and college memories, frozen moments from a time when she still looked at me like I was her hero instead of her burden. This was the room where I'd rocked her through colicky nights as a baby, where Ellen and I had helped her with algebra homework at the small white desk I'd custom built to fit perfectly under her window. Every piece of furniture, every careful detail had been chosen with love and installed with hope for her future. The master bedroom was the hardest room to face. Ellen's side of the bed still had her water glass on the nightstand, her bookmark still marking page 247 of a novel she'd never finish. I'd built the walk-in closets with my own hands, custom designed to accommodate Ellen's petite frame perfectly. Her clothes still hung there, still carrying the faint scent of her favorite perfume. This was the room where we'd planned our future together, where we'd whispered about our dreams for Caitlin's life, where Ellen had died holding my hand while machines beeped around us in a symphony of medical futility. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you," she'd said near the end, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're too good, Roy. Too generous. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." I'd promised, but I hadn't kept that promise, had I? For 2 years, I'd let my daughter and son-in-law treat me like their personal bank account, while I convinced myself it was just family helping family. In my home office, I found the folder of construction photos Ellen had lovingly preserved. Pictures of me laying the foundation in the spring of 1999, 25 years younger and 50 pounds stronger. Photos of my crew installing the frame while Ellen, visibly pregnant with Caitlin, brought us lemonade on scorching summer days. The financial records from those years told a story the photos couldn't capture. We'd taken out a second mortgage to afford quality materials. Ellen had taken a part-time job at the local school district to help cover costs. We'd eaten beans and rice for months, driven cars held together with prayer and duct tape, but we'd built this house with our own sweat and sacrifice. We'd done it all for love, for each other, for the family we were creating, for the future we were building one careful decision at a time. And now my daughter wanted to sell it all and put me away like an inconvenient piece of furniture that no longer matched her decor. I picked up Todd Fisher's business card, its edges worn from 3 years of handling. The phone number was still clear, and my hands were steadier than they'd been in months. Caitlin and Jeremy thought they were dealing with a confused old man who'd be grateful for any attention they threw his way. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to hand over my life's work without putting up any kind of fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I dialed Todd's number and listened to it ring, my hands steady as stone. Outside, the spring morning was bright and clear, the kind of day Ellen used to say was Denver at its finest. The law offices of Fisher and Associates occupied the second floor of a modest brick building on Colfax Avenue, the kind of place that specialized in helping regular people with real problems rather than impressing corporate clients. I'd chosen my best suit, the charcoal gray one Ellen had picked out for me to wear to her funeral, and arrived 15 minutes early. Todd Fisher was younger than I'd expected, maybe 55, with graying temples and the patient demeanor of a man who'd heard every family horror story at least twice. His office was lined with law books and family photos, a wife, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever, the kind of normal life Ellen and I had tried to build. "Mr. Hayes, good to see you again," Todd said, pouring coffee from a small machine in the corner. "I remember you and Ellen from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I accepted the coffee, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need to discuss something delicate about my daughter and son-in-law." Todd settled behind his desk, pen ready. "I'm listening." I told him everything. The phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell my house and warehouse me in some nursing facility. Todd's expression never changed, but I caught him shaking his head slightly when I described their eagerness to spend my money on their Boulder dream house. Unfortunately, Mr. Hayes, this scenario is more common than you'd think, Todd said, setting down his pen. Adult children often assume they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when valuable assets are involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? Legally, I mean. Let's start with the basics. The house is titled in your name only since your wife's passing, correct? That's right. Ellen and I owned it jointly, but when she died, it transferred to me automatically. Then legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, cannot make any decisions about your assets without your explicit consent. Todd pulled a legal pad from his drawer and began making notes. The house belongs to you. Period. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something sharper. So if I wanted to sell it myself? You could put it on the market tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision. Todd looked up from his notes. May I ask why you're considering that option? I thought about Caitlin's laugh when she called me a burden, about Jeremy's cold calculation of my worth, about 25 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like a piece of property. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is. Todd was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Denver's housing market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Properties are selling within days, often for cash offers above asking price. He paused. If you were serious about selling quickly, before your daughter and son-in-law return from their trip, how fast could it happen? With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for properties like yours, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe less. Todd leaned forward. But Mr. Hayes, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built that house with my own hands, Mr. Fisher. Every board, every nail, every custom detail. I know exactly what I'm doing. We spent the next hour discussing practicalities, market value estimates, cash buyer networks, legal requirements. Todd explained that he could have everything prepared within 24 hours if I was serious about proceeding. The consultation fee is $200, Todd said as I prepared to leave. If you decide to move forward, that applies toward my legal fees for the sale. I paid in cash, feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. Walking to my truck in the spring sunshine, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Caitlin's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture her in some hotel lobby in Phoenix, probably checking her watch, wondering why her grateful old father wasn't jumping to answer her call. Let her wonder. Let her and Jeremy make their plans about my future, my house, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone kept ringing as I climbed into my truck, Todd Fisher's business card secure in my wallet, and a plan forming in my mind that would teach my ungrateful daughter exactly who she was dealing with. I had built my life from nothing once before. I could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on my own terms. By the time I reached my driveway, confidence had replaced the tremor in my hands. Todd's words echoed in my mind. It's your property, your decision. 25 years of doubt and second-guessing had lifted like Denver fog in the morning sun. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Through the window, I could see it buzzing against the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Caitlin's name glowed on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. Let her stew for a moment. Let her wonder why her grateful old father wasn't scrambling to answer. I poured myself a glass of water, took a deep breath, and picked up on the 6th ring. Dad, there you are. Caitlin's voice practically sparkled with artificial enthusiasm. I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier. Sorry, sweetheart. I was out running some errands. I kept my tone warm, grandfatherly. How's Phoenix treating you? Oh, you know how these business conferences are. But listen, I have the most wonderful news. She paused for dramatic effect. Jeremy and I have been planning something very special for you. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white. Oh? We want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve some rest and relaxation after everything you've been through since Mom died. Her voice carried that practiced sympathy I now recognized as manipulation. There's this beautiful place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand, just in case you need anything. A resort with medical staff. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to such trouble for me. Nonsense. Your family. Jeremy's voice came through in the background. He must have been listening on speakerphone. We've already made all the arrangements. When were you thinking? I managed, knowing full well they wanted me gone before they returned to claim their inheritance. Well, we should be back by next Friday, Caitlin said. We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack some clothes and personal items. You know, the essentials. The essentials. Not the photo albums Ellen had lovingly arranged. Not the furniture I'd built with my own hands. Just the essentials for an old man being shuffled off to die. Actually, Caitlin, I have a surprise for you too when you get back. Oh, Dad, what kind of surprise? She sounded genuinely pleased, probably imagining I'd signed papers or made their job easier somehow. I walked to the bay window I'd built for Ellen, looking out at the garden she'd planted, the porch swing where we'd spent countless evenings planning our future. It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised. You're so sweet, Dad. We'll talk about everything when we get home, okay? Get some rest and we'll take care of everything else. Sweet. She called me sweet while planning to steal my life. I will, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Dad. See you Friday. The line went dead, and I set the phone down with hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. I walked to my home office and opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life with possibilities I'd never considered before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed, Real Estate Agents, Denver. The search results filled my screen like ammunition in a war I was finally ready to fight. I'd always been methodical. 25 years as a construction engineer had taught me to research thoroughly before making any decision. Tonight, that methodical nature would serve a different purpose entirely. I clicked through agent profiles, comparing success rates and client testimonials like I used to compare structural steel suppliers. Cherry Hills, Highlands Ranch, University Hills. Neighborhoods where houses sold for the kind of money Caitlin and Jeremy were already spending in their dreams. One name kept appearing in the top results. Brian Connor, 43 years old, specialized in quick sales, averaged 18 days from listing to closing. His photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes, the kind of man who could make things happen fast. His testimonials were exactly what I needed to see. Brian sold our house in 6 days. Cash buyer lined up within 48 hours. Smooth closing, no complications. I stared at his direct phone number prominently displayed beneath his credentials. This was it, the moment that would set everything in motion. Once I made this call, there would be no going back to being the grateful, manageable old man my daughter expected. Ellen's photo on my desk seemed to be watching me. I could almost hear her voice. Roy, are you sure about this? I was sure. More sure than I'd been about anything since her funeral. I dialed Brian Connor's number with steady fingers. Brian Connor, Connor Real Estate. How can I help you? Mr. Connor, my name is Roy Hayes. I'm interested in selling my house quickly. How fast can these things actually happen? Well, Mr. Hayes, that depends on several factors. But with the right property and pricing strategy, I've closed deals in as little as 10 days with cash buyers. What kind of timeline are you looking at? 10 days. My heart hammered against my ribs. 10 days? That fast? Absolutely. Denver's market is incredibly hot right now, especially for well-maintained properties in established neighborhoods. Can you tell me a bit about your house? I looked around my kitchen, seeing it through a buyer's eyes for the first time. 2-story, 3,400 square feet, built in 1999. Cherry Creek area, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. I've maintained it well. Did most of the work myself over the years. Brian's voice sharpened with interest. That sounds exactly like what several of my investors are looking for. Original owner, well-maintained, established neighborhood. Those are premium selling points. Would you be interested in a property assessment? How quickly could you come by? I can be there this afternoon if you're available. Say 3 o'clock? I glanced at the clock. It was just past noon. 3 o'clock works perfectly. Let me give you the address. After I hung up, I sat in the sudden quiet of my kitchen, the magnitude of what I'd set in motion beginning to settle in my chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the house Ellen and I had built together, assigning dollar values to our memories. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for too long: control. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning my house with an intensity I hadn't felt since Ellen's funeral preparations. Every surface had to be perfect, every corner spotless. I found myself dusting picture frames that hadn't been touched in months, straightening throw pillows that no one would sit on, polishing doorknobs that already gleamed. But this wasn't the nervous energy of a man preparing for guests. This was the focused determination of someone preparing for battle. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my shirt, took a breath that carried the faint scent of Ellen's lavender sachets still tucked in the linen closet, and walked toward the front door. My hand closed around the brass doorknob I'd installed myself 15 years ago, and I realized that beyond this door waited either my salvation or my complete destruction. I opened the door to find Brian Connor looking exactly like his photograph, professional but approachable, with the kind of confident bearing that came from years of successful deals. He carried a leather portfolio and tablet, and the moment he stepped inside, his eyes went wide. Wow. He stopped in my entryway, his gaze traveling from the crown molding I'd installed by hand to the hardwood floors Ellen and I had selected together. Mr. Hayes, this is exactly what I was hoping to see. I watched him take in the details, the way afternoon light streamed through Ellen's bay window, the seamless flow from living room to dining room that I'd achieved by removing a load-bearing wall and installing a support beam. His appreciation was genuine, professional. You weren't kidding about maintaining this place. He pulled out his tablet and started taking photographs. These hardwood floors throughout, original? Installed them myself in 2001. Ellen wanted something that would last, so we went with 3/4 inch solid oak. I found myself falling into the familiar rhythm of discussing my work, proud despite everything that was happening. And this kitchen? Brian stopped at the granite countertop, running his hand along the edge. Custom installation, every inch. Ellen picked the pattern, said the gold veining reminded her of sunlight. My voice caught slightly. I spent 3 weekends getting the measurements perfect. Brian was typing notes on his tablet, photographing the custom cabinets, testing faucets and outlets with the thoroughness of someone who knew what buyers wanted. Mr. Hayes, I have to be honest with you. In my 15 years doing this, I rarely see properties maintained to this standard. I'm an engineer, was an engineer. I believe in building things right the first time. It shows, he gestured toward the living room. May I? I nodded, following him as he admired the open floor plan, the built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace, the way Ellen's decorating choices had turned our construction project into a home. This bay window, custom work? Built it for my wife. She wanted a reading nook. I could picture her there with her mystery novels and afternoon tea, reading glasses perched on her nose. Brian was taking measurements now, his excitement barely contained. Mr. Hayes, I need to show you some comparable sales. He pulled up listings on his tablet. Similar properties in this area have been selling for $850,000 to $920,000. My chest tightened. That was more than Caitlin and Jeremy had estimated in their cruel conversation. But given the condition and custom features of your home, I'm thinking we price it at $890,000. That should move it quickly while getting you top dollar. $890,000. I sat down heavily in Ellen's reading chair, the numbers spinning in my head. That much? I managed. Mr. Hayes, you're sitting on a gold mine. Properties like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition. Brian's voice carried the confidence of someone who knew his business. I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this type of property. What kind of investment group? They specialize in high-quality rental properties in established neighborhoods. They pay cash, no financing contingencies, no repair negotiations. They can close in 10 business days. 10 business days. Caitlin and Jeremy would return from Phoenix in 8 days, expecting to find their grateful, manageable father ready to be shipped off to their resort. What's the catch? Why so fast? Brian smiled. No catch. Cash means no loan delays, no appraisal contingencies that could kill the deal. They do their own inspections, but frankly, your house is in better shape than most new construction. I looked around the living room where Caitlin had taken her first steps, where Ellen and I had hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet Sunday afternoons reading the paper together. When would I need to be out? Standard contract gives you 30 days after closing, but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting clear title and completing the paperwork. I thought about Caitlin's voice on the phone, calling me sweet while planning to steal my life. I thought about Jeremy's cold calculation, reducing me to a burden to be managed. I thought about Ellen's warning about being too generous, too trusting. Let's do it. Brian's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine excitement. Excellent choice, Mr. Hayes. Let me call them right now. I watched him dial, heard him describe my property with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found buried treasure. Cherry Creek area, original owner, immaculate condition, custom features throughout. He ended the call with a broad smile. They want to move forward immediately. I can have the initial contracts ready by tomorrow morning. The sun was setting through Ellen's bay window, casting golden light across the room where I'd just agreed to sell 25 years of my life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for too long. Control. How does 9 a.m. sound? The question hung in the air like smoke, and I realized Brian was waiting for an answer that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily in the silence. 9 a.m. sounds perfect. After Brian left with promises of contracts and closing timelines, I stood alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else. The evening light through Ellen's windows painted everything golden, like a photograph of a life I was about to leave behind. But it wasn't sadness I felt, it was anticipation. Brian arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone. The kind of professional efficiency I'd always respected. I read every line with the thoroughness that had made me a good engineer, checking details the way I used to check blueprints. Sale price, $890,000. Cash purchase. Closing date, 10 business days from signing. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, walked me through each signature. Minimal contingencies, just the title search and final walkthrough. And you can remain in the house for 30 days after closing if needed. That's correct, Mr. Hayes, though most sellers prefer to move out sooner rather than later, just for peace of mind. Peace of mind. I almost laughed. The only peace of mind I'd have would come from seeing Caitlin and Jeremy's faces when they discovered what their burden had done. I signed my name with steady hands, and just like that, the process was in motion. The first 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork and inspections. The title company began their search through decades of records. The investors sent their team, a polite crew who admired my workmanship and found nothing to complain about. Your father really knew what he was doing, one of them told another, assuming I was already gone. These floors, this electrical work, all top quality. Days 4 through 6, I became a man with a secret mission. I researched apartments online, looking for something small but comfortable, somewhere I could start over with nearly $900,000 in the bank. I found a place in Highlands, a senior community with golf courses and a community center, the kind of place Ellen and I had sometimes talked about for our golden years. I also called storage facilities, planning which of Ellen's things I'd keep and which I'd have to leave for the new owners. Her china, definitely, her jewelry box, the photo albums, the essentials of a life lived together. Days 7 through 9 brought a strange confidence I hadn't felt in years. Each morning, I woke up knowing I was one step closer to freedom, one step closer to showing my daughter that her confused old father was sharper than she'd ever imagined. Mrs. Patterson from next door noticed the activity, asked about the inspectors and official-looking people. Just some work being done, I told her, hating the half-truth but knowing the full truth would spread through the neighborhood before I was ready. On day 8, Brian called with final confirmation. Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mr. Hayes. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to funds immediately. That night, I packed a single suitcase with clothes and personal items, not because I was moving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything. I looked at Ellen's photo on our dresser and whispered, I hope you understand what I'm doing. Friday morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of spring day Ellen used to say was Denver at its finest. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not the funeral suit, but the navy one Ellen had bought me for Caitlin's college graduation. The title company office was all professional efficiency and congratulations. The buyers were represented by their attorney, a sharp woman who double-checked every document. Brian handled the paperwork like a conductor leading an orchestra. Mr. Hayes, if you'll sign here and here, initial there. Each signature felt like cutting a chain. The deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that 1247 Maple Street no longer belonged to Roy Hayes. And this is your wire transfer confirmation. $890,000, less closing costs, has been deposited to your account. I stared at the numbers on the paper. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. More money than Caitlin and Jeremy had dreamed their burden could access. We shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Brian walked me to my truck, promising to stay in touch if I ever needed real estate services again. You made the right choice, Mr. Hayes. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need. I drove home through neighborhoods I'd known for 25 years, past the elementary school where Caitlin had learned to read, past the park where Ellen and I used to walk every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, I felt liberation. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck, looking at the house that was no longer mine. The keys to the front door felt heavy in my palm, but tomorrow I'd hand them over to the new owners and walk away from this chapter of my life. Caitlin and Jeremy were due back from Phoenix in 3 days. They'd arrive expecting to find their grateful, manageable father, ready to be packed off to their resort. Instead, they were going to find an empty house and a lesson they'd never forget. I climbed out of my truck and walked toward my front door, reaching for my phone to make the next call in a plan that was working better than I'd ever hoped. The engine ticked as it cooled in my driveway, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside just yet. I sat staring at the house I'd built with my own hands, the house that now belonged to strangers, the house where Caitlin and Jeremy expected to return and find their grateful, manageable father waiting to be shipped off. The keys to the front door felt like lead in my palm. New owners or not, I still had access for 30 days, time enough to complete what I'd started. I drove to a 24-hour locksmith service I'd found online. The emergency fee would cost an extra $200, but money was no longer a concern. Emergency locksmith, this is Eddie speaking. I need all my door locks changed today. It's urgent. What kind of time frame are we looking at, sir? As soon as possible. I can pay cash. I can be there in 2 hours. Address? Back at the house, I waited for Eddie in my truck, watching Mrs. Patterson water her garden next door. She waved, and I waved back, my chest tight with the knowledge that I was about to cross a line there was no coming back from. Eddie arrived in a van full of tools and hardware, a man in his 50s who'd clearly seen every kind of lock emergency Denver had to offer. Security issue, sir? He asked, studying my front door. New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry. He nodded like he'd heard it before and got to work. I watched him remove the locks I'd installed 15 years ago, the brass hardware Ellen had picked out because it matched our door knocker. These are quality locks, Eddie commented as he worked. Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them. That was me. I like things done right. The new locks were silver instead of brass, modern instead of traditional. They clicked differently when Eddie tested them, a sharper, more mechanical sound than the old ones. Here are your new keys, sir. 3 copies of each, front door, back door, and garage side entrance. Eddie handed me a ring of keys that felt foreign in my palm. That'll be $450 with the emergency fee? I paid in cash from my wallet, knowing there would be no paper trail connecting Roy Hayes to this transaction. After Eddie left, I stood in my empty house and began the hardest part, packing 25 years of life into what I could carry. Ellen's jewelry box went into my suitcase first, along with our wedding photos and the novel she'd been reading when she died. Bookmarks still marking page 247. My engineering certificates, our important documents, Ellen's favorite cookbook with handwritten notes in the margins. I left almost everything else. The furniture that told our story would have to stay, the photo albums chronicling Caitlin's childhood, Ellen's clothes still hanging in our closet, still carrying the faint scent of her perfume. While I packed, I called apartment complexes on my phone, explaining that I needed a furnished one-bedroom immediately. We have a lovely unit available for immediate occupancy, said Mrs. Chen, the property manager. Month-to-month lease if you prefer flexibility. I'll take it. I met Mrs. Chen at the apartment complex an hour later, a modest but clean building designed for seniors with a community center and well-maintained grounds. The one-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, furnished with everything I needed to start over. Cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mr. Hayes. When would you like to move in? Tonight. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. I signed the lease and handed over first month's rent plus deposit, nearly $3,000 that would have seemed impossible to spend casually just 2 weeks ago. Loading my car in the gathering dusk, I caught Mrs. Patterson watching from her window. She waved again, and I felt the weight of all the relationships I was severing, all the connections Caitlin and Jeremy had forced me to cut. I took one last walk through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing differently now that the house belonged to someone else. In the kitchen where Ellen had taught Caitlin to bake Christmas cookies. In the living room where we'd watched Caitlin open presents on Christmas morning. In our bedroom where Ellen had taken her last breath, while I held her hand. I'm sorry, honey, I said aloud to Ellen's memory. But you'd understand. You always said I was too generous for my own good. I locked the new locks and drove away from Maple Street for what might be the last time, my rearview mirror full of the life I was leaving behind. The sun was setting when I arrived at my new apartment complex, my car loaded with the essentials of my existence. I carried my suitcase to my new front door, fumbling with unfamiliar keys to unfamiliar locks. Inside the small apartment, I dropped my suitcase and immediately reached for my phone. The final phase of my plan required one more crucial element, something that would capture Caitlin and Jeremy's reaction when they discovered what their burden had done. I opened my laptop on the small dining table and began researching surveillance equipment. After 30 minutes of careful comparison, I found what I needed: a wireless mini camera hidden inside what looked like a phone charger, Wi-Fi enabled with smartphone app control, motion-activated recording, crystal clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream live footage directly to my phone from anywhere with internet access. I ordered it with expedited shipping, paying the extra $40 to guarantee Thursday delivery. The total cost was $149, an amount that would have made me hesitate 2 weeks ago, but barely registered now. With the camera ordered, I turned to the next crucial element: the note that would explain everything to Caitlin and Jeremy when they discovered their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, missing the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third draft, I found the right tone: dignified but devastating, loving but final. I wrote in my careful engineer's handwriting, the penmanship Ellen had always admired. Dear Caitlin and Jeremy, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. I heard your phone conversation about putting me in a nursing home because I'm becoming a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd make selling my house. The house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is safely in my new bank account where it will stay. I've moved to a place where I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Don't worry about me. Worry about your own housing situation. I gave you everything I had for 25 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad. Thursday morning, the FedEx truck arrived at my apartment with a small box containing my surveillance equipment. I spent an hour in my kitchen testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably clear, the audio sharp enough to catch whispered conversations. Thursday afternoon, I drove to my former house for the last time. I used the garage door opener I'd never given Caitlin and Jeremy, parking inside to avoid questions from neighbors. My hands shook slightly as I approached the front door with my new keys. Inside, the house still smelled like home: Ellen's lavender sachets, the lemon oil I used on the wooden furniture, the faint residue of 25 years of family dinners. I positioned the camera charger by the front door outlet, angling it perfectly to capture anyone entering. The view through my phone app showed the entire entryway, including the spot where I planned to hang my note. I tested the motion detection, walking in and out of frame until I was satisfied the system would capture every moment of their return. Then I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level, where they couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in my living room one final time, I touched the mantel where Ellen's photo had sat for 23 years. The new owners would put their own family photos there, create their own memories in the rooms Ellen and I had filled with love. It's done, sweetheart, I whispered to Ellen's memory. Justice served. I locked the house with my new key, tested the camera feed one more time from my car, and drove back to my apartment. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone ready to alert me the moment Caitlin and Jeremy discovered their keys no longer worked. Back in my apartment, I sat in my chair with my phone in my hand, watching the empty doorway through the camera app. The timestamp showed 6:30 Thursday evening. Tomorrow, Caitlin and Jeremy would return from their business trip, probably discussing their nursing home plans and already spending my money in their minds. They had no idea their grateful old father had become their worst nightmare. I woke Friday morning with the anticipation of a man about to witness justice after years of injustice. My coffee tasted better than it had in weeks, and even the small apartment felt less confining as I settled into my chair with my phone, the camera feed showing my empty former doorway. 4:30 came and went. They should arrive soon. I'd memorized their travel patterns. Caitlin always insisted on leaving Phoenix by noon to avoid traffic, and Jeremy drove exactly the speed limit. They'd be pulling into my driveway within the hour. I looked at Ellen's photo on my nightstand. I hope you understand what I'm doing, honey. They left me no choice. 5:15. My phone buzzed with motion detection. A black SUV pulled into the driveway of my former house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the screen. Caitlin stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Jeremy emerged from the driver's side, pulling their suitcases from the back. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim their inheritance. I watched them approach the front door, Caitlin fishing her keys from her purse while Jeremy set the luggage down. She inserted her key into the lock I'd had changed just yesterday. The key didn't turn. Caitlin frowned, examining her key ring. She tried again, jiggling the key with growing frustration. "That's weird," her voice came through my phone speaker. "My key's not working." Jeremy stepped closer, his expression shifting from tired to concerned. "Let me try the back door." I watched him disappear around the side of the house while Caitlin continued struggling with the front lock. When Jeremy returned 3 minutes later, his face had darkened with alarm. "Back door's locked too, and the garage remote isn't working." His voice carried the edge of panic I'd hoped to hear. "Caitlin, someone changed these locks." "What? That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths." Jeremy studied the front door more carefully, his financial advisor's mind recognizing trouble when he saw it. "These are brand new locks. This isn't an accident." Caitlin pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling Dad." I watched her dial my old landline, the number I'd had disconnected 3 days ago. After several rings, her face crumpled with confusion. "No answer. It's not even going to voicemail." "Try his cell phone." "He doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting him one for emergencies." Her voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. Jeremy was examining the windows now, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "There, that one's unlocked. I can boost you up." I watched my daughter climb through the kitchen window I deliberately left unlatched, her business suit catching on the frame. She disappeared inside, and moments later, the front door opened from within. Jeremy entered with their suitcases, and both of them stopped dead when they saw the white envelope taped to the door at eye level. Caitlin's hand trembled as she pulled down the envelope with her name, and Jeremy's written in my careful script. I leaned forward in my apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands as she tore open the seal. Her eyes moved across my words, Jeremy reading over her shoulder. I watched their faces change, confusion to shock, to disbelief, to horror. "He sold the house." Caitlin's voice rose to a near shriek. "How could he do this to us?" Jeremy snatched the note from her hands, reading it again as if the words might change. "That manipulative old bastard. He was playing us the whole time. $890,000. Caitlin was crying now, her careful makeup streaking down her cheeks. "He kept it all. That money was supposed to be our future." "Your future?" Jeremy snapped, his mask of devoted son-in-law finally slipping. "This is your father, Caitlin. You should have handled this better." "My fault?" She whirled on him, years of suppressed resentment boiling over. "You're the one who said he was becoming a burden. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home." "Well, he was a burden. Look what he's done to us." Jeremy gestured wildly around the room that was no longer theirs. "We're homeless. Our lease expires next week." The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They were fighting in my living room about being homeless, just as they'd planned to make me homeless in their nursing home. "Call a lawyer," Caitlin said desperately. "There has to be something we can do. He can't just sell the house without telling us." "With what money?" Jeremy's voice dripped with contempt. "In case you forgot, I lost my job 6 months ago, and your marketing salary barely covers our car payments." "Then get another job." "Where do you think financial firms are lining up to hire advisors who got fired for questionable transactions?" I watched my daughter's face crumble as she realized the full scope of their situation. No house, no inheritance, no savings, and Jeremy's unemployable status finally revealed. "How could he be so cruel?" she whispered. "The same way you were cruel when you called him a burden and planned to warehouse him," Jeremy shot back. "The old man was smarter than both of us." Through my phone screen, I watched them collapse into my old furniture. Furniture that would be gone tomorrow when the new owners took possession. Caitlin buried her face in her hands while Jeremy stared at my note with the expression of a man who'd finally understood he'd been outplayed. I turned off the camera feed. I'd seen enough. Walking to my small kitchen, I opened the bottle of Ellen's favorite wine I'd saved from the house. A 2018 Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. I poured myself a glass and raised it toward Ellen's photo. "To you, my love, justice served." The wine tasted like victory. They'd learned what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Caitlin trying to reach me through some new method. I deleted it without reading and powered off the phone completely. Walking to my window, I looked out at the Denver skyline painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, my daughter and her husband were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in my former house, they were learning that their burden had become their biggest problem. For the first time in 2 years since Ellen's death, I felt completely free. I was no longer anyone's burden. I was my own man again, with my own money, my own choices, and my own future stretching ahead like an open road. Roy Hayes had left the building, and he was never coming back. And you know what? Sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who deserve the biggest wake-up call. Caitlin and Jeremy thought they were dealing with a confused old man who'd roll over and let them steal everything I'd worked for. Instead, they discovered that 73 years of life had taught me a thing or two about strategy. If this story taught you anything, it should be this: never mistake kindness for weakness, and never assume that someone's love makes them blind to your betrayal. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is also the smartest. Make sure to hit that like button if this story gave you the justice you were craving, and subscribe for more incredible tales of people who refuse to be walked on. Let me know in the comments. Do you think I went too far? Or did Caitlin and Jeremy get exactly what they deserved? Until next time, remember, respect your elders. You never know what they're capable of.